Missouri. Key facts. Abbreviation MO. Nickname the Show Me State. Capital Jefferson City. Flower Hawthorne. Tree flowering dogwood. Bird Bluebird. Nut East black walnut. Motto Salus populi suprema esto. The well-being of the people should be supreme law. Still following the Mississippi River, I arrive in a snowy St. Louis. Humming, and who doesn't arrive doing exactly the same thing, the song Meet Me in St. Louis, Louis. Only as I soon discovered the town is properly pronounced not St. Louis, but St. Louis, no one told Judy Garland. Some miles to the north of the city, the Missouri River, arriving from the northwest, joins the Mississippi in a great confluence. The feeling of having left behind the Delta and the Deep South is very strong. Which part of America am I now in? Missouri is bordered by 3 southern states, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee, but by 5 true Midwestern states, 2 Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Oklahoma, and Kansas. If any state could lay claim to being the middle of Middle America, then perhaps it is Missouri. And what a splendid mixture of distinguished natives and residents you can boast. A range of literature from Laura, Little House on the Prairie, Wilde, and to T.S. Eliot and Tennessee Williams by way of Mark Twain. The city of St. Louis calls itself the gateway to the West, and it's hard to avoid the concrete manifestation of this nickname in the shape of Finnish architect Eero Saarinen's enormous 1930s concrete construction, the Gateway Arch, which dominates the downtown and riverside townscape. The City Museum. A pleasing sense of Missouri as an eclectic patchwork is reinforced by a morning spent in one of the most bizarre and beguiling museums I have ever visited. The City Museum, St. Louis, is the brainchild of Bob Cassely, who shows me around with the same enthusiasm and delight that is shown by the hundreds of thousands of children who come here daily to interact with his unusual creation. Museum is perhaps not quite the right word for so interactive and compelling a public amenity. A vast converted space, once the world's biggest shoe factory, this dreamlike fantasy describes itself as an eclectic mixture of children's playground, funhouse, surrealistic pavilion, and architectural marvel. I would be happy playing all day, but I have a lunch appointment with someone who plans to show me another side of the city. Homeless in St. Louis. McMurphy's Grill in North Street is a pleasant and well-run restaurant offering the best kind of mid-range American menu, somewhere between fast and fancy food. I'm especially taken by the toasted ravioli as St. Louis specialty, but I've come more for the company than for the food, and for once in my greedy life the person beside me absorbs more of my attention than the plate in front of me. McMurphy's is a restaurant run by recovered alcoholics and drug addicts, by those who have slipped from the lowest rung of the ladder and are being given a lift back up. Owned by the city's St. Patrick Project, the idea, familiar to those of us who watched Jamie Oliver create his 15 restaurant in London, is to help the homeless and the addicted by giving them a skill in which they can take pride. It is very easy to give up drink or drugs when there is nothing awaiting you, the other side of addiction. The restaurant and catering trays seem to offer just the right blend of attainable skills, social interactions, and high professional standards. Pride in self, my lunch companion William tells me, is the hardest thing to find when you wake up from the nightmare of addiction and start trying to live a new life. William should know, For a quarter of a century he survived on little more than alcohol and crack cocaine. St. Patrick's brought him in from the cold, literally. He worked the kitchen, the front of house here at McMurphy's, and he attends 12-step programs in the rooms above the restaurant. Giving up is only the beginning, he says. Once you are free of your drugs and drink, you then have to face the person, the real you, who's been hiding under them all the time. William has been stuffing me with toasted ravioli for a good reason. He wants me to see the streets and those houses that were his home for so long. And at this time of year, with snow on the streets and a bitter wind howling, internal fuel is important. In a derelict area behind the disused power station, I am shown around these old haunts, desolated factories and railhead depots, where the homeless still live. Mark and Lauren and Harry, three guests of the riverfront Hilton, a ruined old warehouse, invite me to warm my hand round their fire. It is bitterly, bitterly cold, and I step my feet hoping that I will soon be able to leave for the warmth of my cab. I find it impossible to imagine that these could be my home, my life. Harry and Mark take turns to show me piles of receipts they keep in their wallets, receipts which prove how much money they make selling old scrap. See, $300 a day. I can make it more than that some days. Despite their addict poverty, homelessness, and alcoholism, they think of themselves as successful people. The receipts are so old as to be legible. This pride and self-delusions is touching and bewildering. We say goodbye and William takes me back to McMurphy's, where poetry evening is promised. People, even Americans, often find it difficult to talk about themselves. Poetry gives them a kind of verbal costume in which they can express themselves with more dignity and confidence than the common dress of everyday speech will allow. I stand to Dr. Williams' fellow addicts and poets, but I often know poetry on my own. My own experiences seem so exotic, so well-fed, and yet so ordinary next to theirs. I drive north to Iowa, alternately hugging myself and excoriating myself for my good fortune.